The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Oak Ridge Elementary as Officer Sarah Miller scanned the schoolyard, her hand resting on her German Shepherd's back. Max's ears suddenly pricked forward, his body tensing beneath her fingers. Sarah followed his gaze to a well-dressed man approaching the front office, his smile practiced, his movements too precise. Something wasn't right. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, but Max was already moving, a low growl building in his chest. The man knelt before a small girl with a pink backpack, his hand extended. For a fraction of a second, fear flickered across the child's face, a silent plea that only Max seemed to hear. Then everything exploded into motion. The man grabbed the girl's arm, the child screamed, and Max lunged forward with a ferocity that sent parents scrambling. Sarah's hand flew to her radio as she sprinted after them, her heart pounding in her ears. "Officer in pursuit of child abduction in progress," she shouted as the man threw the girl into a waiting car. What happens in the next 60 minutes will determine whether 7-year-old Emily Johnson ever sees her mother again. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Officer Sarah Miller hadn't always been drawn to the K-9 unit. That decision came 23 years ago, on the rainy April evening when her 8-year-old sister Lily never came home from soccer practice. Sarah had been 12 then, old enough to understand what the grim-faced officers meant when they said, "We're doing everything we can." Young enough to believe them. When they found Lily's butterfly hair clip by the reservoir 3 weeks later, Sarah made a promise over her sister's empty casket. She would protect the children Lily never got to be. Max had been with her for 6 years now, a muscular German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes that missed nothing. They'd become one of the most respected K-9 teams in the department, with a special focus on child endangerment cases. Sarah had insisted on that specialization, though her sergeant had warned it might reopen old wounds. "Some wounds never close," she'd told him, and that had been the end of the conversation. The Oak Ridge Elementary Patrol wasn't even part of their regular beat. They were filling in because the assigned unit had been redirected to a bank robbery, a stroke of fate that would soon prove decisive. Emily Johnson was known to Max before she became known to tragedy. The 7-year-old daughter of Karen Johnson, who was currently fighting stage 3 breast cancer, Emily had a habit of saving part of her lunch for the police dog whenever she spotted them near the school. Max would sit patiently while Emily fed him bits of her sandwich, his tail thumping against the sidewalk, while Sarah chatted with the little girl about her day. What Sarah didn't know then was that Emily's father had been Officer Daniel Johnson, killed in the line of duty 3 years earlier while investigating a suspected human trafficking operation. What she couldn't have known was that Max had once belonged to Daniel, before being reassigned after his handler's death. The dog had never forgotten the scent of the little girl who used to climb into his bed during thunderstorms. And now, as a well-dressed stranger with perfect credentials approached Emily Johnson, something deep in Max's K-9 memory recognized a threat his human partner couldn't yet see. The man who approached the school administration office moved with practiced confidence. His charcoal suit was immaculately pressed, his leather briefcase gleaming in the afternoon light. Richard Davidson, according to the visitor badge clipped to his lapel, smiled warmly at the front desk secretary, who returned the gesture with professional courtesy. "I'm here to pick up Emily Johnson," he announced, his voice carrying the perfect balance of authority and friendliness. "Her mother had an unexpected medical appointment. I'm her uncle." The secretary, Miss Winters, nodded and began typing on her computer. "Of course, Mr. Davidson. I'll just need to see your ID and check our approved pickup list." Outside, Sarah watched the interaction through the glass doors, noting how the man's shoulders remained perfectly square, his posture unnaturally composed. Most parents or guardians showed some sign of impatience or casual relaxation, but this man stood as if being evaluated. Max's growl deepened, vibrating against Sarah's leg. In 6 years of service, she'd never felt him react this strongly to someone who wasn't actively threatening them. She unclipped her radio, keeping her voice level as she requested a background check on the visitor. "Dispatch, this is Officer Miller at Oak Ridge Elementary. Can you run verification on a Richard Davidson? Claims to be picking up a student as next of kin." Inside, Ms. Winters was examining the man's driver's license. "Everything looks in order, Mr. Davidson. Let me just call Emily down from her classroom." The wait lasted less than 2 minutes, but Sarah noticed how Davidson's eyes darted repeatedly toward the exit, the way his right hand kept touching his coat pocket, how he never once glanced toward the classroom hallway with the natural anticipation of someone waiting for a child. Then Emily appeared, her small frame nearly swallowed by her oversized pink backpack, clutching a paper bird she had made in art class. When she saw Davidson, her steps slowed, confusion clouding her features. "Emily," Davidson's smile widened as he extended his hand. "Your mom asked me to pick you up today. Remember me, Uncle Richard?" Emily stepped closer, her head tilted in uncertainty. "My mom didn't say anything this morning." At that moment, Sarah's radio crackled. "Officer Miller, we have no Richard Davidson authorized for pickup of Emily Johnson. Mother confirms no appointments today and no uncle by that name." Sarah was already moving, pushing through the doors, her hand hovering near her holster. "Sir, I need you to step away from the child." Everything happened in heartbeats. Davidson's friendly facade dissolved into cold calculation. He lunged forward, grabbing Emily's arm and yanking her against his side. Ms. Winters screamed. Emily's paper bird fluttered to the floor. "Back off," Davidson snarled, his free hand producing a small black object from his pocket. Not a gun, a remote detonator. "Police, let her go," Sarah commanded, drawing her weapon as Max barked ferociously beside her. "Step closer and I trigger the smoke bombs. You'll never find us in the chaos." Davidson began backing toward the exit, dragging a terrified Emily, whose eyes were now wide with fear. "Officer Miller!" Emily cried out, recognition flashing through her panic. "Help!" Sarah kept her gun trained on Davidson, calculating risks in fractions of seconds. A shot was impossible with Emily so close. The school was full of children. The smoke threat was real. "Last warning," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "Release her now." Davidson's response was to press the button. Instantly, 3 smoke canisters deployed around the perimeter of the lobby, thick gray clouds billowing upward. Children screamed in distant classrooms. The fire alarm blared to life. "Max, fine," Sarah commanded as visibility dropped to near zero. The German Shepherd surged forward into the smoke, guided by senses far superior to human limitation. Sarah followed, her forearm covering her mouth, moving by instinct and training through the spreading haze. Outside, she caught a glimpse of Davidson shoving Emily into a silver sedan. Max was already charging toward them, teeth bared in protective fury. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, breaking into a sprint across the parking lot. Davidson slammed the car door shut just as Max reached them, the dog's powerful jaws clamping onto the man's sleeve. Davidson howled in pain but managed to yank free, leaving fabric in Max's teeth as he scrambled behind the wheel. Sarah aimed for the tires but couldn't risk hitting Max, who was now throwing himself against the vehicle's door, desperate to reach Emily, whose small palms pressed against the window from inside. The sedan peeled away, tires screeching against asphalt. Sarah raced to her patrol car, radioing for backup as Max leapt into the passenger seat. "All units, child abduction in progress. Silver Lexus sedan heading west on Maple Drive from Oak Ridge Elementary. Suspect is armed, 7-year-old female, hostage inside." As Sarah activated her sirens and swerved into pursuit, something small and white caught her eye on the school steps. A crumpled piece of paper that had fallen from Emily's pocket. She would discover it later. A crude hand-drawn map with 5 X marks, 4 crossed out, and Emily's name next to the 5th. Below, in adult handwriting, Collection complete by 8 p.m. International transport waiting. Emily wasn't the first, and if Sarah failed, she certainly wouldn't be the last. The silver Lexus weaved through traffic with reckless precision, running 2 red lights in quick succession as Sarah struggled to keep pace. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, while Max remained alert in the passenger seat, his eyes never leaving the vehicle ahead. "Expect heading north on Riverside Drive," Sarah updated dispatch, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Request roadblock at the intersection with Harmon Street." "Copy that, Officer Miller," the dispatcher responded. "Be advised, Detective Thomas is taking lead on this case. He's requesting you maintain visual but do not engage until backup arrives." Sarah bit back her frustration. Wait for backup while Emily was in the hands of a kidnapper? Every second increased the distance between the child and safety. The Lexus suddenly veered right, tires screeching as it disappeared down a narrow alley. Sarah followed, her police cruiser barely fitting between the brick walls on either side. When she emerged onto Cedar Street, the silver car was nowhere in sight. "Damn it!" She slammed her palm against the dashboard. "Dispatch, I've lost visual on the suspect vehicle. Last seen entering the warehouse district off Cedar." Max whined, pressing his nose against the window. Sarah knew that sound. He hadn't lost the scent. She pulled over, making a quick decision that went against direct orders. "I'm continuing pursuit on foot with K9. Suspect may be hiding in the area." She released Max from the vehicle, giving him the command to track. The German Shepherd moved with purpose, nose to the ground, leading her deeper into the maze of abandoned buildings. Sarah's radio crackled. "Miller, this is Thomas. Return to your vehicle immediately. We have new information on the suspect." She hesitated, watching Max's determined trajectory. "Roger that, Detective. Information? Suspect is not Richard Davidson. Facial recognition from school security cameras identifies him as Nathan Reed, wanted in connection with 3 open child abduction cases across state lines." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Copy. Any connection to victim?" There was a pause before Thomas responded. "Reed claims to be the biological father of Emily Johnson. He filed for custody last year but was denied. Made several complaints to Child Protective Services, alleging abuse by the mother." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't a random abduction. It was targeted, planned, personal. "Were the CPS complaints investigated?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "Investigated and dismissed as unfounded," Thomas confirmed. "But here's where it gets complicated. Reed has been linked to a trafficking operation we've been monitoring. We believe he's using custody disputes as cover to identify and target vulnerable children." Max suddenly froze, his posture alerting Sarah to a discovery. Before them stood a weathered storage facility with roll-up metal doors. Unit 17's padlock had been recently cut. "Detective, I think I've found something. Storage facility on Warehouse Row. Miller, do not approach. Tactical team is 8 minutes out." Sarah looked at her watch. Nearly 40 minutes had passed since the abduction. If the note she'd glimpsed was accurate, they were running out of time. "Max guard," she whispered, drawing her weapon and approaching the storage unit. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible beyond. She listened, hearing nothing but her own controlled breathing and Max's vigilant presence beside her. With practiced efficiency, she pulled the door upward in one swift motion, weapon raised. The unit was empty except for a child's pink backpack lying discarded on the concrete floor. "Emily?" Sarah called out, stepping carefully inside. No response. Max nosed the backpack, then turned to a small office at the rear of the unit. Sarah followed, pushing open the door to find a makeshift operations center. Maps pinned to walls, surveillance photos of 5 different children, including Emily. 4 had red X's marked through their faces. "Oh, God," Sarah whispered, scanning the documents. Travel manifests, shipping schedules, forged identification papers. A laptop still hummed on the desk, its screen showing a cargo manifest for a container ship departing Westport Harbor at 8 p.m. less than 3 hours away. The sound of approaching footsteps caused her to spin around, weapon raised, but it was only Detective Thomas, his badge catching the dim light as he entered. "I told you to wait," he said, holstering his own weapon when he saw her. "We don't have time," Sarah gestured to the wall. "He's moving these kids tonight. Emily is the last one." Thomas surveyed the evidence, his expression grim. "This is bigger than Reed. These operations don't run on one man's efforts." Sarah picked up a document from the desk, a school visitor log printed from Oak Ridge Elementary's database, complete with parent pickup authorizations. "Someone at the school is helping him. There's no other way he could have these records." As Thomas called in the evidence team, Sarah studied the surveillance photo of Emily. It had been taken 3 weeks ago, showing the little girl and her mother leaving the hospital after cancer treatment. Karen Johnson looked frail, leaning on her daughter for support, a 7-year-old bearing the weight of an adult. "Have officers check on Karen Johnson," Sarah instructed. "If Reed blames her for losing custody, she could be in danger too." Thomas nodded, then hesitated. "Miller, I need to ask, can you remain objective on this case? Your history." Sarah stiffened. Everyone in the department knew about Lily. "I'm the best chance Emily has right now. Max and I can track them when your tactical team can't." Before Thomas could respond, Sarah's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Officer Miller," she answered cautiously. "You should have stayed out of this." The voice was unmistakably Reed's. "This isn't what you think." Sarah signaled to Thomas, who immediately began tracing the call. "Let Emily go, Nathan. Whatever your grievance with her mother, Emily doesn't deserve this." A bitter laugh came through the line. "Karen Johnson isn't her mother. She stole Emily from me after Daniel died. The courts wouldn't listen. CPS wouldn't listen. So I'm taking back what's mine before she disappears forever." "Daniel Johnson? The police officer?" Sarah asked, buying time for the trace. "My brother," Reed said. "When he died, Karen gained custody of Emily. My daughter, not hers. But you don't care about that, do you? None of you ever cared about the truth." The call ended abruptly. Thomas looked up from his phone. "We got a location. Harbor District, near the shipping yards." A text came through on Sarah's phone. An image of Emily, terrified but alive, sitting inside what appeared to be a shipping container. The message below simply read, "She belongs with her real family." Sarah showed it to Thomas, her voice hardening with resolve. "He's taking her out of the country tonight, and someone inside the school helped him do it." The tactical briefing took place in a makeshift command center at the Harbor Police substation, a cramped room now filled with officers, harbor security, and federal agents. On the wall hung satellite images of Westport Harbor, the massive container yard marked into quadrants for the search operation. 20 minutes had already ticked away since discovering Reed's location. 20 minutes Emily didn't have. "The container yard covers 12 acres. Detective Thomas pointed to the map. "Over 2,000 containers currently on site, with more being loaded for tonight's outbound shipments. 3 vessels scheduled to depart before midnight." Sarah stood at the back of the room, anxiety gnawing at her composure as the tactical commander outlined their methodical search plan. Beside her, Max sat at attention, sensing her urgency. "We'll divide into 4 search teams," the commander continued, "quadrant by quadrant, starting with the shipping areas for tonight's vessels." "That'll take hours," Sarah interjected, drawing disapproving glances from several senior officers. "Reed's text showed Emily inside a container that's already staged for loading. We need to focus on the pier where the Oceanic Star is docked." Officer Michael Williams, recently transferred from another precinct, shook his head. "That's assuming Reed was telling the truth about tonight's shipment. Could be misdirection." Something about Williams had bothered Sarah since his arrival 6 months ago. A certain detachment when children were involved in cases, a reluctance that manifested as procedural caution rather than urgency. "The shipping manifest we found matched the Oceanic Star," she countered. "It's leaving at 8. That's," she checked her watch, "less than 2 hours from now." Thomas raised his hand to quiet the debate. "We'll prioritize the Oceanic Star's cargo but maintain the quadrant search protocol. Miller, your K-9 unit will accompany Alpha Team to the loading zone. Williams, you're with Bravo Team covering the storage yard. Let's move." As the teams dispersed, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Chief Patterson, his weathered face grave with concern. "I know what you're thinking, Miller," he said quietly. "This isn't like Lily. We'll find her." Sarah nodded stiffly, the comparison sending a familiar ache through her chest. "Yes, sir." She followed Alpha Team to their transport, Max trotting obediently at her side when her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Check the school visitor logs. Look who signed off on Reed's credentials." Sarah stopped abruptly, pulling up the digital copy of the document she'd forwarded to herself from the storage unit. Scrolling to the signature line, she felt her breath catch. Lisa Cooper, Oak Ridge Elementary's administrator, had personally approved Reed's visitor status, overriding the system security protocols. "Thomas," she called, jogging back to the detective. "We need to bring in Lisa Cooper from Oak Ridge. She authorized Reed's access." Thomas frowned, taking the phone. "You're sure? Her signature is right there. She bypassed normal verification." He nodded grimly. "I'll have patrol pick her up. You focus on the harbor search." The ride to the harbor was tense, officers checking weapons and radios while Sarah replayed her interactions with Cooper over the years. The woman had always seemed dedicated to her students' welfare, organizing safety drills and implementing advanced security protocols after a shooting at a neighboring district. Had she been compromised somehow? Blackmailed? Or was she willingly involved? 20 minutes later, Alpha Team deployed at the loading zone for the Oceanic Star, a massive cargo vessel being loaded by towering cranes that swung containers through the air like children's building blocks. The team leader distributed photographs of Emily and Reed to the dock workers, most of whom shook their heads apologetically. "Max, find Emily," Sarah commanded, offering the dog Emily's hair elastic from her personal effects bag. The German shepherd sniffed it thoroughly, then raised his nose to the salt-tinged air, searching. After a moment's consideration, Max began moving purposefully between the stacked containers, Sarah following close behind. 2 officers joined them, sweeping each row systematically, while the rest of Alpha Team coordinated with harbor security to delay the Oceanic Star's departure. "K-9 unit proceeding to section D7, Sarah reported into her radio. "Max has a direction." "Copy that," Thomas responded. "Be advised, Cooper is in custody. She's not talking. Lawyered up immediately." That confirmed Sarah's suspicions. Lisa Cooper wasn't an unwitting accomplice. She was deliberately involved. Max suddenly accelerated, his powerful body surging forward with newfound certainty. Sarah broke into a run behind him, the officers struggling to keep pace. The dog led them deeper into the maze of containers, away from the loading zone toward a less active section of the yard where containers awaited processing. He finally stopped before a blue container marked with shipping codes for agricultural equipment. No obvious signs indicated anyone had tampered with it, but Max sat firmly, the signal that he'd found his target. "This is Miller. Possible location identified in section E4. Container number WXCT 7,734,982. Copy, Miller. Hold position. Tactical approaching your location." But Max was growing increasingly agitated, standing up and pacing before the container's doors, whining softly, a behavior Sarah recognized from training. Something was wrong inside. She approached cautiously, pressing her ear against the metal. At first, only silence. Then, faintly, a muffled sob. "Emily? Emily? It's Officer Miller. Are you in there?" The sobbing stopped, followed by a small voice. "Officer Miller, is Max with you?" Sarah's heart leapt. Yes, he's right here. We're going to get you out. He said if I made any noise, bad people would hurt my mom. Is my mom okay? Your mom is fine, Sarah assured her, though she had no confirmation of Karen Johnson's status. Can you tell me if anyone else is in there with you? A pause. No, he left a while ago. The doors are locked. Sarah examined the container's locking mechanism. Standard commercial locks, but it would still require specialized equipment to open without the key. Tactical is 3 minutes out, one of the officers informed her, checking his radio. Sarah nodded, keeping her voice calm for Emily's benefit. Emily, we're going to open these doors, but it might take a few minutes. Just stay back from the entrance, okay? Okay, the small voice agreed. Officer Miller, I'm scared. The simple admission tightened Sarah's throat. I know, sweetheart, but Max and I aren't going anywhere. As if understanding his role, Max lay down directly in front of the container, his body pressed against the doors, his soft whine a constant reassurance of his presence. Sarah's radio crackled. Miller, be advised we have reports of armed security approaching your position. Harbor surveillance shows 3 individuals moving through Section E3, heading your way. She scanned their surroundings, a narrow corridor between towering walls of containers, limited cover, 2 officers besides herself. Not ideal defensive positioning. Roger that. We need that tactical team now. One of the officers, Rodriguez, moved to the end of the row to establish a sightline, while the other, Bennett, positioned himself on the opposite approach. Sarah remained by the container, her hand resting on Max's back. Emily, she said softly, I need you to move to the very back of the container and lie down flat on the floor. Can you do that for me? Why, what's happening? Just a precaution. We might make some loud noises opening the door. There was a shuffling sound as Emily presumably followed instructions. I'm at the back now. Sarah drew her weapon, nodding to Rodriguez, who had tensed at the sight of movement in the distance. 3 figures in private security uniforms were methodically checking containers, their hands hovering near concealed weapons beneath their jackets. Police officers, Rodriguez called out, his weapon raised. Hands where I can see them. The response was immediate and violent. All 3 security guards drew weapons, one firing instantly while the others dove for cover. Rodriguez dropped to one knee behind a container support, returning fire as bullets pinged off metal around him. Officer under fire, Sarah reported, positioning herself to shield the container doors while Bennett moved to support Rodriguez. Section E4, at least 3 armed suspects. Max growled deeply, his protective instincts triggered by the gunfire, but remained in his commanded position guarding Emily. Memory flashed through Sarah's mind. She was 12 again, watching helplessly as officers cordoned off the neighborhood where Lily had last been seen, the same impotent terror gripping her heart. Not again? Not this time? Tactical team is rerouting to your position, dispatch informed her. ETA 90 seconds. 90 seconds was an eternity in a firefight. Bennett had maneuvered to flank one of the gunmen, while Rodriguez maintained suppressive fire on the others. Sarah kept her weapon trained on the narrow corridor leading directly to Emily's container. A shadow moved at the periphery of her vision. A 4th figure approaching from behind, using the containers as cover. Sarah pivoted, recognizing Officer Williams a moment before she nearly fired. Williams, report to Rodriguez's position, she ordered, turning her attention back to her assigned sector. Change of plans, Williams replied, his voice oddly flat. The wrongness of his tone registered a split second before Sarah felt cold metal press against the base of her skull. Drop the weapon, Miller. Understanding crystallized with sickening clarity. You're working with them. Smart girl, Williams confirmed. Now drop the gun before I put a bullet in your brain and blame it on our friends over there. Sarah slowly lowered her weapon, mind racing. You approve Cooper for the school position. You've been identifying targets for Reed." Williams chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Reed's an idiot who thinks this is all about getting his niece back. He has no idea what she's really worth on the international market. Now call off your dog." Max had turned toward them, his hackles raised, a low, warning rumble emanating from his chest as he recognized the threat to his handler. "He only responds to my commands if I'm not under duress," Sarah lied smoothly. "You shoot me, he'll tear your throat out before you can aim again." Uncertainty flickered across William's face. He knew enough about police K9S to recognize the plausibility of her claim. In the distance, the gunfire had intensified as Bennett and Rodriguez engaged the other armed men. Sarah could hear the approaching sirens of the tactical team, still too far to help. "Here's what's going to happen," Williams said. "You're going to order your dog to stand down, then open that container. The girl comes with me, and you get to live." "Why, Emily, why these specific children?" Sarah asked, stalling for time, calculating angles and risks. Williams shrugged. "Special orders for blonde, blue-eyed American girls with no close family ties. Emily's mother won't last 6 months with that cancer. No one will look very hard for an orphan." The casual cruelty of his assessment made Sarah's blood boil, but she maintained her composure. "And Cooper? How long has she been identifying vulnerable children for you?" 3 years. Amazing what people will do when their gambling debts get high enough." Williams jabbed the gun harder against her skull. "Enough talk. Open the container." Sarah knelt slowly, maintaining eye contact with Max, whose muscles were coiled in anticipation. She reached for her utility belt, extracting a small tool designed for breaking car windows in emergencies. "This won't open the lock," she said. "We need the bolt cutters from the tactical team." Williams cursed. "They'll be here any second. Move!" Sarah's hand closed around the glass breaker, its hardened steel point pressing into her palm. She'd have one chance. "Max," she said quietly, "protect." The German Shepherd exploded into motion, not toward Williams as the corrupt officer expected, but toward the container door, his body slamming against the metal with a resonant boom. In the split second of Williams' confusion, Sarah pivoted, driving the glass breaker toward his gun hand with all her strength. The reinforced point pierced through his wrist, causing him to howl in pain and drop the weapon. Sarah didn't hesitate, tackling him to the ground as Max continued creating a thunderous distraction at the container. Williams fought back viciously, his training evident as he rolled her over, hands reaching for her throat. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he snarled, blood from his wounded wrist dripping onto her face. "This goes higher than you can imagine." Sarah drove her knee upward, connecting solidly with his groin. As he doubled over, she broke free, scrambling for her weapon. Williams lunged after her, his fingers closing around her ankle. The distinctive crack of a sniper rifle echoed through the container yard. Williams jerked backward, a look of surprise frozen on his face as he collapsed. "Officer Miller, are you okay?" The tactical team commander's voice came through her radio. "Sniper reports clean shot on your assailant." Sarah pulled herself up, breathing heavily. "Confirmed. Suspect down. We need bolt cutters for the container immediately." Max had returned to her side, his fur bristling as he stood guard over her. In the distance, the remaining gunmen were being subdued by the tactical team that had finally arrived. When the bolt cutters arrived moments later, Sarah herself cut through the lock. The heavy doors swung open to reveal a terrified Emily huddled at the back of the otherwise empty container, her small face wet with tears. "Max!" the girl cried, recognizing the dog instantly. The German Shepherd looked to Sarah for permission, then bounded into the container, reaching Emily and gently nuzzling her hand. The child threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. Sarah approached slowly, kneeling beside them. "You're safe now, Emily. We're going to take you to your mom." Emily looked up, her blue eyes haunted. "The man said he was my real uncle. That my dad wanted me to go with him. Was he lying? Sarah hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. Sometimes adults tell lies to get what they want. But your mom is waiting for you, and she loves you very much. As Sarah helped Emily out of the container, Detective Thomas approached, his expression grave. Williams was dirty. We found offshore accounts linking him to at least 7 child trafficking cases. Cooper's talking now, giving up names. Sarah watched as paramedics wrapped Emily in a shock blanket, Max refusing to leave the girl's side. What about Karen Johnson? She asked. Officers found her unconscious at her home, drugged, but she'll recover. Looks like Williams paid her caregiver to slip something into her medication. Relief flooded through Sarah, followed quickly by cold determination. And Reed? Thomas shook his head. Still at large, but with Williams down and Cooper cooperating, his support network is crumbling. Sarah looked back at Emily, now sitting in the ambulance with Max's head in her lap, the child's small fingers absently stroking his fur. The image blurred as unexpected tears filled her eyes, not for Emily, who was safe, but for Lily, who hadn't been. This isn't over, she said quietly. Reed made this personal. He'll try again. We'll assign protection to both Emily and her mother, Thomas assured her. But Sarah knew better than anyone how protective details could fail, how determined predators could slip through the cracks of even the most vigilant systems. As she watched the ambulance doors close with Emily and Max inside, she made a silent promise to the child who reminded her so much of her lost sister. This time the story would end differently. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and artificial lavender, a combination that had always made Sarah uneasy. She sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair outside Karen Johnson's room, where Emily had finally fallen asleep, curled against her sedated mother. Max lay at Sarah's feet, his vigilant eyes tracking every person who walked past, his body tense despite his apparent relaxation. Detective Thomas approached, carrying 2 cups of vending machine coffee. He handed one to Sarah, who accepted it gratefully, though she doubted the bitter liquid would do much to cut through the exhaustion fogging her mind. Protection detail is in place, Thomas said, lowering himself into the chair beside her. 2 officers outside the room, hospital security alerted, and we've restricted visitor access to medical personnel only. Sarah nodded, taking a sip of the coffee and grimacing. Any word on Reed? Nothing yet. We've got his photo at every transit point in a 100-mile radius. Border Patrol is on alert, and the FBI has taken over the larger trafficking investigation. Thomas rubbed his eyes, the events of the day etched in the lines of his face. Cooper's given us names, lots of names. This network is bigger than we imagined. And deeper into our department than we thought, Sarah added, the betrayal of Williams still a raw wound. Thomas's phone buzzed. He checked the message, his expression darkening. They've found 3 more containers at the port, all prepped for offshore transport. He hesitated before continuing. Empty, but they found evidence children had been held there recently. Hair samples, fingerprints. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, imagining what might have happened if they'd arrived a day later. How many kids are we talking about? At least 12 that we can confirm in the past 6 months. Cooper says they targeted children with minimal family connections. Foster kids, those with terminally ill parents, kids from broken homes. He shook his head in disgust. The perfect victims. No one looks too hard when they disappear. The echo of her own past was too close to ignore. Except someone always cares, Thomas. Someone is always left behind wondering. A nurse emerged from Karen's room, checking the chart before noticing Sarah. "Officer, the little girl is asking for you." Sarah rose, patting her leg to signal Max to follow. Inside the dimly lit room, Karen Johnson remained unconscious, IV tubes threading from her thin arms, her complexion gray against the white hospital pillows. Cancer had already hollowed her cheeks and thinned her once thick hair, but the strong resemblance to Emily was still evident. Emily sat up as they entered, her small frame swimming in a borrowed hospital gown. "Max?" she whispered, a ghost of a smile appearing. The German shepherd padded quietly to her bedside, resting his chin on the mattress within Emily's reach. The child immediately buried her fingers in his thick fur. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked gently, taking the chair beside the bed. Emily shrugged, her eyes too old for her 7 years. "Is my mom going to be okay?" "Yes," Sarah assured her. "The medicine they gave her just made her very sleepy. She'll wake up soon." Emily nodded, processing this. "The man who took me, was he really my uncle?" Sarah hesitated, wondering how much truth a 7-year-old could or should handle. "He is related to your father, but he lied about a lot of things. He wasn't supposed to take you from school." "He said Mom stole me," Emily whispered, her voice small. "That she wasn't my real mom." Sarah's heart ached at the confusion in the child's eyes. "Emily, your mom is absolutely your real mom. She loves you very much." "But what about my dad? The man said my dad wanted me to be with him." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Your dad was Officer Daniel Johnson. He was a brave police officer who loved you and your mom very much. He would never want anyone to take you away from her." She gestured to Max. "Did you know that Max used to be your dad's police dog? Before I became his partner?" Emily's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really. That's why Max is so protective of you. He remembers you from when you were even smaller than you are now." This revelation seemed to comfort Emily, who stroked Max with renewed affection. "Dad used to let Max sleep on my bed when I had bad dreams," she recalled softly. Sarah smiled. "Max is very good at keeping bad dreams away." A small noise from the doorway drew their attention. Thomas stood there, his expression urgent. "Miller, we need to talk, now." Sarah excused herself, instructing Max to stay with Emily, who had already nestled back against her pillows, eyelids growing heavy once more. In the hallway, Thomas pulled her aside, keeping his voice low. "We've got a problem. Karen Johnson's medical records were accessed remotely an hour ago using Williams' credentials." Alarm shot through Sarah. "Williams is dead. Someone else has his access?" "Exactly. And that means—" "They know where Emily is," Sarah finished, already moving toward Karen's room. "We need to move them immediately." Thomas caught her arm. "There's more. The chief wants you off this case." "What? Why?" "He says you're too emotionally involved, that your history with your sister is clouding your judgment." Thomas looked uncomfortable delivering the message. "He's sending a different team to relocate the Johnsons to a safe house." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "Thomas, you know that's wrong. Max and I have the best chance of protecting Emily. She trusts us." "I know. That's why I'm telling you this instead of having the chief deliver the news himself." He checked his watch. "The new team arrives in 20 minutes. I suggest you use that time to say goodbye to Emily." Sarah's mind raced, analyzing this development from every angle. The chief removing her from a high-profile case wasn't entirely surprising. She'd broken protocol at the container yard, engaged a corrupt officer without backup, but the timing felt wrong. "Who authorized the team change? Where's the paperwork?" Thomas frowned. "The chief called it in directly, said the paperwork would follow." A cold suspicion formed in Sarah's gut. "Did you speak to him personally? Voice confirmation?" "No, it came through dispatch." Sarah was already moving, drawing her weapon. "Call him right now, on his personal cell." Thomas pulled out his phone, dialing rapidly as he followed her back toward Karen's room. After a moment, his expression changed. "Chief?" "Yes." "It's Thomas. Did you just order Miller removed from the Johnson Protection Detail?" He listened, his face draining of color. "Understood." He hung up, meeting Sarah's eyes. "He gave no such order." The request didn't come from our department. They rounded the corner to find one of the protection detail officers slumped on the floor, a small dart protruding from his neck. The second officer was nowhere to be seen. "Call hospital security! Full lockdown!" Sarah ordered, kicking the door to Karen's room open, weapon raised. Emily screamed as the door banged against the wall. Max was already in a defensive position, hackles raised, teeth bared toward the window, where a figure in hospital scrubs was halfway through the opening. "Please, freeze!" Sarah shouted, aiming directly at the intruder. The figure lunged forward instead of retreating, revealing Reed's cold, determined face beneath a surgical cap. In his hand was not a weapon, but a syringe, which he drove toward Karen's IV line. Max reacted instantly, launching across the room in a blur of fur and muscle. His jaws closed around Reed's forearm, the powerful pressure of his bite drawing a howl of pain as the syringe clattered to the floor. Sarah circled the bed, keeping Emily behind her as she maintained her aim. "Nathan Reed, you're under arrest. Release the IV and step away from the patient," Reed snarled, blood dripping from his arm where Max maintained his grip. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. She's not supposed to be here." "Neither are you," Sarah countered. "It's over, Reed. Your operation is blown. Cooper is talking, Williams is dead, and we've found your containers." Something dangerous flickered in Reed's eyes. With unexpected strength, he yanked his bleeding arm free from Max's jaws and lunged for Emily, who shrieked in terror. Sarah fired, her bullet striking Reed in the shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't fall, his momentum carrying him forward until Max intercepted again, this time clamping onto his leg and dragging him to the ground. Thomas burst into the room, weapon drawn, taking in the scene in an instant. "Hospital security is on the way. Second officer was found unconscious in the stairwell." Reed struggled beneath Max's weight, his face contorted with rage and pain. "You think this ends with me? They'll send others. They always get what they want." Blood seeped through his scrubs where Sarah's bullet had found its mark. "Who are they, Reed?" Sarah demanded, maintaining her aim while checking that Emily was unharmed. "Who are you working for?" Reed's laugh was hollow, edged with desperation. "People you can't touch. People who own half this city, including your precious police department." His eyes fixed on Emily with disturbing intensity. "Special orders for special children. Do you know how much a healthy American child brings on the international market? Millions!" Sarah felt her stomach turn at the casual commodification of children's lives. "You won't see a penny of that money where you're going." "You don't understand," Reed insisted, his voice taking on an almost pleading quality. "I never wanted to hurt her. I just wanted to save her from Karen. She stole Emily after Daniel died. Emily is my brother's child with his first wife, not Karen's daughter at all." The revelation hung in the air, Emily's small gasp confirming she'd heard every word. "That's a lie," Thomas said firmly. "We've seen Emily's birth certificate. Karen Johnson is her biological mother." Reed's face twisted. "Forgeries! All of it! After Daniel died, Karen wouldn't let me near Emily. My own niece. When I tried to get custody, she falsified documents, claimed Emily was hers. The DNA test would prove it if anyone bothered to check." Sarah glanced at Emily, who had pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Whether Reed's claims were true or delusions, the damage to the child was being done with every word. "That's enough," she said coldly. "Thomas, get him out of here." As hospital security arrived and helped Thomas secure Reed, Sarah holstered her weapon and knelt before Emily, who was trembling visibly. "Is it true?" the little girl whispered. "Is Mom not my real mom?" Sarah took Emily's small hands in hers. "Emily, listen to me. Family isn't just about blood or DNA. It's about love. Your mom has loved you and cared for you every day of your life. That makes her your real mom, no matter what." Emily's eyes filled with tears. But what if he's telling the truth? What if she did steal me? Sarah chose her next words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups fight over children because they all love them so much. But taking you from school the way he did was wrong. Hurting your mom was wrong. She brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face. Right now, what matters is keeping you safe. Max approached, pressing his warm body against Emily's side. The girl automatically wrapped an arm around the dog, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Outside the room, Sarah could hear Reed still shouting as he was escorted away, his voice growing fainter down the corridor. "Ask her about the fire. Ask Karen what really happened the night Daniel died. She knows I'm telling the truth." Emily looked up at Sarah, her young face etched with a confusion no child should have to bear. "What fire? What's he talking about?" Before Sarah could formulate an answer, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital, the fire suppression system activating without warning. Sprinklers erupted overhead, drenching them in seconds. "This is Miller," Sarah shouted into her radio over the cacophony of alarms. "Possible diversionary tactic at Memorial Hospital. Need immediate evacuation assistance for the Johnsons." Thomas appeared in the doorway, water streaming down his face. "It's not just here. Fire alarms triggered in 3 separate wings simultaneously. Hospitals in chaos." Sarah lifted Emily into her arms. "We need to move them. Now, this is our protective bubble breaking." As nurses rushed in to help disconnect Karen from her monitors for emergency transport, Sarah held Emily close, the child's face buried against her shoulder. Max positioned himself at the door, alert for any threat that might emerge from the confusion. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible above the alarms. "Somewhere safe," Sarah promised, though she was no longer certain such a place existed. Reed's words echoed in her mind. "They'll send others. They always get what they want." For the first time since finding Emily, Sarah allowed herself to acknowledge a chilling possibility. What if Reed wasn't the mastermind, but merely a pawn in something much larger and more sinister? Rain pounded against the windows of the safe house, a remote cabin owned by the Department for High-Risk Witness Protection. Thunder rumbled in the distance, nature's percussion accompanying the steady tick of the wall clock. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee as she listened to the soft murmur of voices from the bedroom, where Emily had finally fallen asleep beside her heavily sedated mother. The events at the hospital had been a carefully orchestrated chaos. While they'd managed to evacuate Karen and Emily safely, 3 other patients had disappeared during the emergency, all witnesses in separate ongoing investigations. Not a coincidence, Sarah was certain. "She's asleep," Thomas reported, emerging from the bedroom and closing the door quietly behind him. He looked haggard, the past 36 hours etched into the shadows beneath his eyes. "The doctor says Karen should regain full consciousness by morning. Whatever Reed tried to inject into her IV was a powerful sedative, possibly meant to mimic a natural death." Sarah nodded, the implications chilling. A cancer patient suddenly succumbing wouldn't raise immediate suspicions, leaving Emily truly alone and even more vulnerable. Max lay by the front door, his head on his paws, but his eyes alert, ears twitching at every sound from the storm outside. The German Shepherd had refused food, maintaining his protective vigilance even as exhaustion visibly weighed on him. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from the chief. Medical examiner confirmed Williams had offshore accounts dating back 3 years. Internal Affairs launching full department audit. Stay put until we determine extent of infiltration. She showed the message to Thomas, who cursed under his breath. If there are others like Williams in the department, then nowhere is truly secure, Sarah finished. Not even here. A knock at the door sent Max scrambling to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Thomas drew his weapon, motioning for Sarah to check the security monitor. "It's Johnson," she confirmed, recognizing the patrol officer assigned to perimeter security. "He's early for shift change." Something felt wrong. Sarah signaled to Thomas to maintain his position as she approached the door, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. "Johnson, verification code." "Echo 79 Delta," came the immediate response. "Correct and properly delivered." Sarah unlocked the door, stepping back to allow the rain-soaked officer entry. Johnson nodded his thanks, removing his dripping jacket. "Miserable night," he commented, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Anything I should know before I take over?" "Oh, quiet," Thomas replied, holstering his weapon but maintaining a subtle readiness that only another officer would recognize. "Perimeter sensors are active, backup generator tested and operational." Sarah watched Johnson carefully, noting how his eyes flickered around the cabin, cataloging details with practiced efficiency. She'd worked with him occasionally over the years, a solid officer with a decent record, but not someone she knew well personally. "Coffee?" she offered, using the mundane question to study his reaction. "God, yes. Haven't warmed up since I took position 2 hours ago." Johnson accepted the mug with a grateful nod. "The girl doing okay?" "As well as can be expected," Sarah answered neutrally. "It's been traumatic." Johnson took a sip of coffee. "Nasty business. Williams' betrayal shocked everyone at the precinct. He was always by the book, you know. Never would have suspected. Sometimes the ones who follow procedure most rigidly are hiding the most," Thomas observed, leaning against the counter with calculated casualness. Johnson nodded soberly. "Chief's got everyone on edge. Full department audit, polygraph scheduled, personal finances under review." He grimaced. "Like we're all suspects now." Sarah's phone pinged again, another text from the chief. "Officer Matthew Johnson, not authorized for Johnson Protective Detail. Status?" Her blood ran cold. She kept her expression neutral with practiced effort, sliding the phone into her pocket without responding. They had an imposter in their safe house. "Johnson, how long have you been with the department now?" Sarah asked conversationally, positioning herself to block his view of the bedroom door. 7 years next month," he answered promptly. "The correct information for the real Officer Johnson. Remind me which precinct you transferred from." "West Side, under Captain Rivera." Another correct detail. Whoever this man was, he'd done his homework thoroughly. Sarah made eye contact with Thomas, a silent communication passing between them. He gave an imperceptible nod. "Excuse me," Sarah said, moving toward the bathroom. "Max, stay." The German shepherd remained alert, eyes fixed on Johnson as Sarah stepped away. Once in the bathroom, she quickly texted the chief. "Imposter present, initiating Protocol 7. Request immediate backup." When she emerged, Johnson was checking his service weapon. Standard procedure for shift change, but the timing sent warning signals screaming through Sarah's mind. "Everything all right?" Johnson asked, noting her extended absence. "Fine," Sarah smiled tightly. "Just needed some aspirin. It's been a long day." "I can imagine." Johnson holstered his weapon. "Why don't you get some rest? I've got things covered out here." Thomas yawned deliberately. "Not a bad idea. I could use a few hours myself." The calculated normalcy of their exchange felt surreal, like actors performing for an audience they couldn't see. Sarah moved toward the couch, maintaining casual movements while positioning herself with clear sight lines to both Johnson and the bedroom door. "I think I'll just close my eyes right here for a bit," she said, settling onto the couch without removing her boots. "Max, come." The dog patted over, lying at her feet, but remaining vigilant, sensing the tension in his handler's body. Thomas made a show of checking the perimeter cameras on the tablet before heading toward the second bedroom. "Wake me in 4 hours for my shift." Once Thomas had disappeared into the bedroom, Johnson's demeanor subtly shifted. His movements became more purposeful, his attention more focused as he systematically checked each window and door. Standard security protocol, but something in his manner raised the hairs on the back of Sarah's neck. She pretended to drift off, regulating her breathing while watching him through barely opened eyes. After confirming Thomas was no longer present, Johnson removed something from his ankle holster, not a backup weapon, but a small electronic device with a blinking light. He placed it beneath the kitchen sink, then resumed his position by the front door, checking his watch with increasing frequency. 20 minutes passed in this tense tableau before the lights suddenly went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. The backup generator should have activated immediately, but the cabin remained dark. The device, Sarah realized, had likely disabled it. She heard Johnson moving purposefully through the darkness toward the bedroom where Emily and Karen slept. Sarah slid silently from the couch, drawing her weapon. "Police, freeze!" she commanded, activating her flashlight simultaneously to momentarily blind him. Johnson spun toward her, his own weapon already drawn. "You should have stayed asleep, Miller," he snarled, his voice now stripped of its friendly facade. Max launched forward with a ferocious bark, but Johnson was prepared, kicking a chair into the dog's path and firing a shot that thankfully missed its target. The bedroom door flew open as Thomas emerged, weapon raised. "Drop it, now!" Trapped between two officers, Johnson made a desperate gamble, diving toward the bedroom where Emily was now screaming in terror. Sarah fired twice, catching him in the shoulder and leg. He crashed to the floor with a howl of pain, his weapon skittering across the hardwood. Max was on him instantly, pinning him down with powerful jaws locked around his uninjured arm while Thomas secured the weapon and Sarah moved to check on Emily and Karen. "It's okay," she assured the terrified child, who had crawled beneath the bed. "You're safe now. Come on out." Emily emerged slowly, her small body trembling. "I heard shooting." "I know, honey, but it's over now." Sarah gathered her close, heart aching at how the child flinched at the sounds of Johnson cursing as Thomas handcuffed him. "You think this changes anything?" Johnson spat, blood seeping through his shirt where Sarah's bullet had found its mark. "They'll keep coming. The merchandise is too valuable." Sarah's grip tightened protectively around Emily. "Merchandise? Is that what you call children?" Johnson laughed, a cold sound devoid of humanity. "Business is business. The buyers have already paid a deposit. One way or another, they'll collect." Thomas roughly hauled him to his feet. "Who are you really? Because you're definitely not Officer Johnson." The man's smile was chilling in its confidence. "You'll never find out. And even if you did, it wouldn't help you. We have people everywhere. Your department, hospitals, schools, everywhere." As if to punctuate his point, the radio on Thomas's belt crackled to life with an emergency broadcast. "All units be advised. Officer Matthew Johnson found deceased in his vehicle 1 mile from safe house location. Repeat, Officer Johnson is down." The implications sent ice through Sarah's veins. The real Johnson had been murdered en route, and their location was compromised even before they'd arrived. Someone within their own command structure had set them up. Emily clung to Sarah, her small face buried against her shoulder. "Are they going to keep trying to take me away?" The question held a world of fear that no child should ever have to experience. Sarah looked down at her, seeing shadows of Lily's face superimposed over Emily's features. "Another child failed by the systems meant to protect her." "Listen to me," Sarah said, her voice fierce with protective determination. "Max and I will not let anyone take you. Ever. I promise." But as she held the trembling child, Sarah wondered if this was a promise she could truly keep. Every layer of security had been breached, every safety protocol circumvented. Who could they trust when the enemy wore their own uniforms and spoke with their own authority? For the first time since becoming an officer, Sarah felt the full weight of institutional betrayal crushing down upon her shoulders. The system she'd dedicated her life to had been corrupted from within, turned against the very people it was sworn to protect. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the cabin, watching and waiting, were others who saw Emily not as a child to be cherished, but as merchandise to be delivered. Dawn broke reluctantly through heavy clouds, casting the safe house in murky half-light that matched Sarah's mood. The imposter who had called himself Johnson was now secured in the trunk of Thomas's car, sedated by the medic who had arrived with the genuine backup team an hour earlier. His true identity remained unknown. No fingerprint matches, no facial recognition hits in any database. Outside, crime scene technicians processed the real Officer Johnson's vehicle, where his body had been found, with a single gunshot wound to the head, executed with cold efficiency. His service weapon, badge, and radio had been taken, a professional hit disguised to buy the imposter just enough time to infiltrate their sanctuary. Sarah stood at the window, watching rain drip from the eaves, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. Not since Lily had she felt so utterly helpless against a faceless enemy. "You should rest," Thomas said, appearing beside her with a fresh cup of coffee. "You've been up for nearly 40 hours straight." She accepted the cup, but shook her head. "Can't, not until we're secure. The chief is organizing a new location. Unmarked vehicles, officers from outside our precinct." Thomas lowered his voice. "No one knows except him and the FBI liaison." "I don't trust it," Sarah admitted. "Not anymore. Someone at command level has been compromised." Before Thomas could respond, Karen Johnson's voice called weakly from the bedroom. Sarah found her attempting to sit up, color finally returning to her pallid cheeks, her eyes clear for the first time since the hospital. "Emily?" Karen asked, immediately, maternal instinct cutting through her pharmaceutical haze. "She's safe," Sarah assured her, helping her upright. "Asleep in the other room with Max keeping watch." Relief flooded Karen's face, followed quickly by confusion as she took in her unfamiliar surroundings. "What happened? The last thing I remember is my home nurse giving me my medication." "She was working with them," Sarah explained gently. "They drugged you so they could take Emily." Horror replaced confusion in Karen's eyes. "But why? Why Emily?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to the already fragile woman. "Mrs. Johnson, there are some things we need to discuss about Nathan Reed's claims." Karen's expression hardened instantly. "So he found her. I knew he would never stop looking." The acknowledgement caught Sarah off guard. "You know Reed? Nathan was Daniel's brother." Karen's hands twisted in the bedsheets. "After Daniel died in that warehouse fire 3 years ago, Nathan became obsessed with the idea that Emily wasn't really my daughter." "And is there any truth to his claims?" Sarah asked carefully. Karen looked away, tears welling in her eyes. "Daniel was married before he met me. His first wife died in childbirth with Emily. I've raised her since she was 6 months old, but legally—" her voice broke. "I never formally adopted her. Daniel and I planned to, but then the fire happened so suddenly." "So Emily is Reed's niece by blood," Sarah clarified. "Yes, but that doesn't give him the right to take her." Karen's sudden vehemence dissolved into a fit of coughing that shook her frail frame. "Daniel had full custody. His will left everything to me, including Emily's guardianship. Nathan contested it, claiming I manipulated Daniel, that I was just his partner, not Emily's real mother." Bitterness edged her words. "As if 3 years of nighttime fevers and first steps and loving her with every breath wasn't real motherhood." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, processing this new information. "Why didn't you tell us this when Reed first took Emily?" "Because I was afraid," Karen admitted, her voice small. "The cancer. The doctors give me 6 months at most. If the courts knew, they might decide Emily would be better off with blood relatives after I'm gone." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "She's all I have left of Daniel. All that matters to me now." The door creaked open, revealing Emily in rumpled pajamas, her small face serious as she regarded the two women. Max followed close behind, his protective instinct evident in how he positioned himself beside the child. "Mom," Emily approached cautiously, "are you feeling better?" Karen opened her arms, and Emily climbed onto the bed, nestling against her mother with familiar ease that spoke volumes about their bond. "Much better now that I see you're safe, sweetheart." Sarah excused herself, giving them privacy for their reunion, though the new revelations tumbled through her mind like puzzle pieces finally connecting. Reed's obsession with Emily wasn't just about trafficking. It was personal, familial. But that made the broader trafficking operations interest in her even more concerning. In the living room, Thomas was on the phone, his expression growing increasingly grave. When he disconnected, he motioned Sarah outside onto the covered porch. "That was forensics," he said once they were alone. "The device our imposter planted wasn't just to disable security. It was transmitting our location and conversations in real time to an external server. Can they trace it?" "Bounce through too many proxies. But here's where it gets interesting. The technology signature matches equipment used exclusively by Blackwater Security." Sarah frowned. "The private military contractor?" "The very same. And guess who sits on their board of directors?" Thomas didn't wait for her guess. "Chief Robert Anderson." The revelation struck Sarah like a physical blow. The chief, her mentor, the man who had supported her transfer to K-9 unit after learning about Lily, who had championed her career advancement despite departmental politics. "That can't be right," she said automatically, even as her mind began connecting previously overlooked details. The chief's unexplained wealth, his frequent absences, his insistence on personally handling certain missing persons cases. "His financial disclosures never mentioned this connection," Thomas continued. "I had the FBI run a deep background. Anderson has offshore accounts receiving regular payments from shell companies linked to Blackwater. He's been on their payroll for at least 5 years. Sarah's mind raced. "And Blackwater has international connections, private transport capabilities, security expertise. Perfect infrastructure for trafficking," Thomas finished grimly. "We need to move Karen and Emily now before—" The crunch of tires on gravel silenced him mid-sentence. A black SUV with government plates pulled up, 2 men in suits emerging with badges already displayed. "FBI," the taller one announced, approaching the porch. "Agent Keller. We're here to relocate the witnesses." Thomas stepped forward. "We weren't informed of any transfer. I need to verify this with my command." "New protocol after Officer Johnson's murder," Keller explained smoothly. "Direct orders from your chief. All communications go through secure channels only." He extended a folder containing official-looking transfer documents with the chief's signature. Sarah exchanged a glance with Thomas, silent understanding passing between them. If Anderson was compromised, these orders meant nothing, or worse, confirmed their suspicions. "Give us a moment to prepare the witnesses," Sarah said, forcing a professional calm she didn't feel. Once inside, she whispered urgently to Thomas, "We can't let them take Emily." Thomas nodded, already texting someone on his personal phone. "I have a contact at the actual FBI field office, confirming now if these guys are legitimate." "We don't have time," Sarah insisted. "If they're Anderson's men, then we need a diversion to get Emily and Karen out the back." Thomas glanced toward the bedroom. "I'll stall them. You get our witnesses to safety." Sarah moved swiftly to the bedroom, where Karen was helping Emily change into clean clothes. "We need to leave, now, through the bathroom window." Karen paled but asked no questions, immediately gathering Emily's few belongings. "Come on, sweetheart, we're going on a little adventure." Sarah was struck by the woman's composure, the quick trust in following instructions without explanation, the instincts of a police officer's widow who understood the unspoken language of danger. As they slipped through the small bathroom window into the wooded area behind the cabin, Sarah heard Thomas engaging the supposed agents in procedural arguments about jurisdiction and proper notification protocols. Max went first, then Sarah helped Emily through before assisting the weakened Karen, who moved with determined energy despite her illness. They had barely made it 20 yards into the forest when shouting erupted from the cabin, followed by the unmistakable sound of a scuffle. Sarah urged Karen and Emily forward, knowing Thomas had just sacrificed his safety to buy them time. "Where are we going?" Emily whispered, clutching Max's collar as they navigated the dense underbrush. "Somewhere very special," Sarah answered, leading them toward a narrow trail barely visible among the trees. "Somewhere only Max knows." The trail wound deeper into the forest, eventually opening onto a small clearing where a rustic hunter's cabin stood, weathered but solid. Sarah led them inside, quickly securing the door behind them. "My father's hunting cabin," she explained to Karen's questioning look. "No one in the department knows about it. We should be safe here temporarily." While Karen settled Emily on a worn but clean sofa, Sarah tried her secure line to dispatch, finding only static. Cell service was non-existent this deep in the woods, both a blessing and a curse. No one could track them, but they couldn't call for help either. "What about Detective Thomas?" Karen asked quietly, once Emily was occupied with examining a collection of old wooden animal carvings. "He'll find us if he can," Sarah said, the unspoken alternative hanging between them. "Right now, our priority is keeping Emily safe." Karen nodded, then lowered her voice further. "She heard everything, you know, about not being my biological daughter. She hasn't said anything, but I know she heard." Sarah glanced at Emily, recognizing the careful way the child was avoiding their conversation. Children are resilient, but they need honesty. When the time is right... "If I die before this is over," Karen began. "Don't," Sarah interrupted firmly. "We're going to get through this." Max suddenly raised his head, ears pricked toward the cabin's single window. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Not immediate danger, but something had caught his attention. Sarah moved to the window, peering cautiously through a gap in the weathered curtains. Nothing visible in the gathering dusk, but Max's senses were far more acute than human perception. "Stay with them," she murmured to Max, drawing her weapon. "I'll check the perimeter." Outside, the forest had fallen unnaturally silent. No birds, no rustling of small animals. Sarah moved along the cabin wall, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the sense of being watched prickled along her spine. A twig snapped somewhere to her left. She pivoted, weapon raised, only to find herself facing a familiar figure emerging from the shadows. "Reed," she breathed, finger tensing on the trigger. Nathan Reed stood with his hands raised, his hospital scrubs replaced by civilian clothes, his wounded shoulder bandaged beneath his jacket. His face was haggard, eyes bloodshot from strain or tears. "I'm not armed," he said quietly. "I've been tracking you since the hospital, not to hurt Emily, to warn you." "About what?" Sarah demanded, not lowering her weapon. "About who you're really dealing with." Reed's voice cracked with urgency. "Anderson isn't just corrupt. He's the architect of the entire operation. Blackwater is just the infrastructure. The real clients are overseas, powerful people who pay millions for children with specific traits. Why should I believe anything you say?" Sarah kept her aim steady, though doubt had begun to creep in. How had Reed found them? And why come alone if his intention was to reclaim Emily? "Because Max knows me," Reed said simply. "He was my brother's dog. He knows I'm not the enemy." As if summoned by his name, Max appeared at the cabin door, hackles raised, but not attacking. Uncertain rather than aggressive. "Max, guard!" Sarah commanded, but the dog remained in place, whining softly as he looked between her and Reed. "He remembers," Reed insisted, "from before the fire, when Daniel was investigating Blackwater's connections to missing children. Anderson arranged the warehouse fire that killed my brother when he got too close to the truth." Sarah's mind flashed to something Karen had said. about Daniel dying in a warehouse fire 3 years ago while investigating human trafficking. Could it be connected? Max was there that night, Reed continued. He was injured trying to save Daniel. That's why they transferred him to a new handler, to remove a witness who could identify Anderson at the scene. The German Shepherd took a hesitant step toward Reed, still whining softly. There was recognition in his behavior, but not the joyful recognition of a friend. Something more complex, tied to traumatic memory. Anderson will never stop hunting Emily, Reed said. Not because she's my niece, but because she was the only one who saw his face the night of the fire. She was there with Daniel. Anderson doesn't know if she remembers him, but he can't take the risk. Sarah's blood ran cold as the pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Emily was with her father the night he died? Reed nodded grimly. Daniel had taken her to work that day, babysitter canceled. She was sleeping in his office when the fire started. Max got her out, then went back for Daniel. That's when the second explosion happened. If what you're saying is true, why didn't you go to Internal Affairs? Why try to kidnap Emily from school? I did go to them, Reed's voice broke. 2 years ago. The officer who took my statement was found dead a week later. Suicide, allegedly. After that, I realized the corruption went too deep. I'd been watching Emily from a distance, making sure she was safe, until Karen's cancer diagnosis hit the medical system. Suddenly, Emily's file was flagged for potential guardian changes. That's when they found her. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him, processing his story. It explained too many inconsistencies to be a complete fabrication, yet trusting Reed seemed equally dangerous. If you're telling the truth, then what do you want now? To protect my niece, Reed said simply, and to bring down the man who murdered my brother. Inside the cabin, Emily appeared at the window, her small face pressing against the glass as she spotted Reed. Her expression wasn't fear, but something far more complex. Recognition mingled with uncertainty. The face of a child confronting a half-remembered nightmare. The hunting cabin's interior was heavy with tension, scented with pine and wood smoke from the small fire Sarah had reluctantly allowed. Reed sat on an ancient wooden chair, hands visible on his knees, while Karen positioned herself protectively between him and Emily. Max had settled near the child, his large body a furry barricade of additional security. Sarah kept her weapon within reach as she considered their impossible situation: a terminally ill mother, a traumatized child, a man claiming conspiracy at the highest levels of law enforcement, and only her own instincts to guide her through the moral labyrinth they now faced. "Start from the beginning," she finally said to Reed. "Everything you know about Daniel's investigation and Anderson's involvement." Reed glanced at Emily, clearly calculating how much to say in her presence. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, seemingly absorbed in petting Max. But Sarah recognized the careful stillness of a child deliberately eavesdropping. "Daniel was working undercover," Reed began quietly. "Special assignment directly under Anderson, investigating connections between missing children cases and certain wealthy international clients. He discovered shipping manifests, financial records linking Blackwater to offshore accounts receiving millions for special cargo." "And Anderson was directly involved?" Sarah pressed. "Anderson wasn't just involved. He was the broker." Reed's voice held the dull certainty of a man who had carried this knowledge too long alone. "He cultivated clients, identified potential targets, used his position to ensure investigations led nowhere." Karen's hand flew to her mouth. "Daniel never told me the details. He said it was safer if I didn't know." "He was trying to protect you both," Reed acknowledged. "The night of the fire he called me, said he'd found proof that went all the way to the federal level. He was going to meet a journalist, hand over everything." Emily suddenly spoke, her small voice startling in its clarity. "Daddy's special box. The one with the golden key." All three adults turned to her in surprise. "What box, sweetheart?" Karen asked gently. Emily frowned in concentration, the effort of retrieving a 3-year-old memory evident in her furrowed brow. Daddy's special treasure box. He kept it in his desk at work. He showed me when the babysitter canceled, said it was our secret. Reed leaned forward. Did he tell you what was inside, Emily? The little girl shook her head. Just papers, but there was a little silver thing, too. A flash drive, Sarah realized. Daniel digitized his evidence. The fire destroyed everything in his office, Reed said. At least, that's what the official report claimed. Sarah processed this, years of investigative instinct clicking into place. But if Anderson staged the fire specifically to destroy evidence and eliminate Daniel, then he would have ensured the flash drive was recovered first, Reed finished, which means it still exists. Karen had gone very still, her eyes fixed on some middle distance as she processed her own memories. Daniel had a safe deposit box, she said slowly, at Merchant's Bank downtown. I never accessed it after his death. I couldn't find the key. Hope flickered across Reed's face. The golden key Emily mentioned? Maybe. Karen turned to her daughter. Emily, do you remember anything else about Daddy's special box or the key? Emily's face scrunched in concentration. He put it on his special chain, the one with the dog tags. Understanding bloomed in Karen's expression. His service tags from his military days. He always wore them under his shirt. Her voice faltered. They weren't returned with his personal effects after the fire. Anderson would have taken them, Reed said grimly, if he knew about the key. Sarah considered their options, painfully aware that every passing minute increased the danger. Thomas hadn't emerged from the safe house, which likely meant he'd been captured, or worse. Without knowing who in the department they could trust, conventional channels were closed to them. Anderson doesn't know we've connected him to this, she said thoughtfully. That gives us an advantage. A small one, Reed countered. He has resources, manpower, and official authority on his side. Sarah turned to Karen. Was Daniel's name on the safe deposit box or yours as well? Both of us. I'm still listed as the co-owner. Then that's our play, Sarah decided. We access that box, secure whatever evidence Daniel compiled, and take it directly to the FBI field office, not local law enforcement. Anderson will have the bank under surveillance, Reed warned. Has probably had it watched since Daniel's death, just in case. That's why you're not going, Sarah turned to Karen. I am. Karen started to protest, but Sarah raised a hand to stop her. You're too recognizable, and your condition makes you vulnerable. Reed is a wanted fugitive. I'm the only one who can move freely, and I have police credentials. What about us? Karen asked, instinctively drawing Emily closer. You stay here with Max, Reed. Sarah fixed him with a hard stare. If this is a trap, if you make any move to take Emily, Max has orders to consider you a lethal threat. Understand? Reed nodded solemnly. I'm not the enemy here, Officer Miller. Sarah wasn't ready to fully trust him yet, but her options were limited. She knelt before Emily, meeting the child's solemn gaze. I need to go away for a little while, but Max is going to stay with you. He'll keep you safe, just like he did before. Emily reached out to touch Sarah's badge. Like when you found me in the metal box? Exactly like that, Sarah forced a reassuring smile. I need you to be brave for a little longer. I'm good at brave, Emily said, with a child's simple confidence. Mom says I get it from my dad. The statement pierced Sarah's heart with its innocent trust. She squeezed Emily's small hand, then stood to prepare for departure. Karen followed her to the cabin's entrance, speaking low. If something happens to you, Max will protect them with his life, Sarah assured her, and I've sent our location to one person I still trust completely. Who? My old training officer. He retired 2 years ago. No connection to Anderson or the current command structure. Sarah checked her weapon one final time. If I don't return within 24 hours, he'll come for you and take you directly to federal authorities outside our jurisdiction." Karen nodded, her face resolute despite the fear shadowing her eyes. Daniel used to say that sometimes one person with the truth was more powerful than an army with lies. "Let's hope he was right," Sarah replied. The journey back to the city was tense, every passing police vehicle a potential threat. Sarah had abandoned her squad car miles from the hunting cabin, instead borrowing an old pickup truck from a neighboring property, leaving a note and cash for the owner. Less conspicuous than a police vehicle, but also lacking its protection and communication equipment. Merchants Bank occupied a stately corner building downtown, its marble columns and brass fixtures speaking to old money and discretion. Sarah parked 2 blocks away, surveying the surroundings for surveillance. Nothing obvious. But Anderson would use professionals, not obvious muscle. She entered through the main doors, badge ready but hopefully unnecessary. The safe deposit vault attendant was a middle-aged woman with a practiced customer service smile. "I need to access box 447 registered to Daniel and Karen Johnson," Sarah stated, sliding Karen's identification and signed authorization across the counter along with her badge. "Mrs. Johnson is ill and unable to come herself." The attendant examined the documents carefully. "I'll need to verify this with my manager, officer. Bank policy for police access to customer boxes." "Of course," Sarah agreed, maintaining a calm exterior while internally calculating how long before the manager might alert Anderson, if he was indeed monitoring the bank. The manager appeared promptly, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who studied her credentials with appropriate diligence before nodding. "Everything appears in order, Officer Miller. Mrs. Johnson's authorization is on file. Please follow me." The vault was cool and quiet, rows of brass-faced boxes embedded in the walls. The manager located box 447. Inserting his key while Sarah used the one Karen had given her, a spare she'd found hidden in an old jewelry box after much searching. "I give you privacy," the manager said, stepping out but leaving the door partially open, as was protocol. Alone with the box, Sarah lifted the lid with reverent care. Acutely aware that she might be handling a dead officer's final testimony. Inside lay a sealed envelope, a small flash drive, and a child's drawing, Emily's artwork, showing 3 stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, and Me, with a large dog beside them. Sarah's throat tightened at this poignant inclusion among such crucial evidence. She quickly examined the envelope, finding detailed financial records, photographs of Anderson meeting with known human traffickers, and transcripts of recorded conversations. Daniel Johnson had been thorough, documenting a conspiracy that reached from local law enforcement into federal agencies and international criminal organizations. The flash drive would contain digital copies and possibly more evidence. Sarah secured everything in her jacket, returning the empty box to its slot before nodding to the manager that she was finished. As she crossed the bank lobby toward the exit, her trained eye caught the subtle shift in the security guard's posture near the door, the almost imperceptible touch to his earpiece, the way his hand moved toward his waistband. They were waiting for her outside. Sarah diverted smoothly toward the restroom, mind racing. The bank's rear exit would likely also be covered. She had minutes, perhaps seconds, before they realized she'd spotted them. In the restroom, she sent a text to her retired training officer. "Priority Alpha, evidence secured, compromise in progress." She attached her current location, then added the address of the federal building downtown. As she slipped the phone back into her pocket, Sarah caught her reflection in the mirror. The same determined eyes that had stared back at her the day she'd joined the force, promising Lily's memory that no child would suffer her fate if she could prevent it. Emily was counting on her now, and this time Sarah wouldn't fail. When the world seems determined to break our promises to the next generation, remember what truly matters. Sarah Miller's story isn't just about a brave officer and her loyal German shepherd protecting a vulnerable child. It's about the sacred duty we all share to safeguard innocence in an increasingly dangerous world. As parents and grandparents, we've witnessed how society has changed, how the community vigilance of our youth has given way to threats that hide behind respectability and authority. Every time little Emily clutches Max's fur for comfort, we're reminded of our own grandchildren and the world they're inheriting from us. The system that should protect them is only as strong as the men and women who stand firm against corruption, who refuse to look away when evil wears a badge or sits behind a mahogany desk. In those quiet moments when Sarah holds Emily close, promising her safety against impossible odds, she embodies what we all wish to be for the children in our lives: an unbreakable shield, a keeper of promises, a guardian who never surrenders to darkness. Because, in the end, what defines us isn't our strength, but our unwavering commitment to those who depend on us most. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.